Did you ever see did you ever see Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs?
I never did.
The animated?
Oh, okay. yeah. I saw it.
Yeah. You know how there's the guy who's always wearing a diaper in the because when he was a kid, he was like the Kipper Snacks baby. So he was advertising that, and he's still in his 30s, like wearing a diaper, like trying to.
I gotta watch it again. I can't remember that guy, but I gotta watch that again.
He's like trying to, reclaim the glory he had as a baby, and I can imagine this guy being like, just going around naked. I'm the Nirvana baby.
Yeah, and nobody believes him, and he's got to like somehow have some kind of.
He has a fish hook with a dollar bill.
He's like, look.
Yeah, don't you see it? Look at the face.
Oh man, that'd be funny to mess with that guy if you knew he was going to be somewhere, and then you say that you're that baby.
Yeah, no, I'm that baby. And everyone's like, there's only one way to find out. Drop him.
Jump in the pool, take off your pants. That's how we're starting this episode.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to 3 Point Perspective, the podcast about illustration, how to do it, how to make a living at it, and how to make an impact in the world with your art. I'm Jake Parker.
I'm Lee White.
And I'm Will Terry. And all three of us are professional illustrators. We've all worked for all the major publishers in the business. We've all taught illustration at universities, and together we've published who knows how many books?
5,000.
1,450. Each week we take questions from you guys, illustrators out in the field doing it and making it happen. We take your questions and we try to answer them. Sometimes we argue, sometimes we agree, but each time you're going to learn something brand spanking new.
That's right.
All right.
Update on you guys. What are you guys working on these days? What's going on?
I have my tarot deck, which I have been talking a little bit about on this podcast, but now it is in full production. I have a launch date of March 2nd. You guys go to my website if you want to get updates and sign up. That's my shameless plug for it, but it's going along really good. I'm having a lot of fun. I understand what I'm doing now, but it took at least, I think I've been working on it for like 6 months now.
Yeah.
To get to the point where I understand what I'm even supposed to do with it.
That's interesting that you really have to you have to drive down that road to see where you've been and to see where you're going,
Yeah. What's interesting is that some days I really am working on it but I don't have a lot to show for it because I'm learning as I go. And so there's not this tangible thing. Like I've got a record of all the hours that I spent thinking about. Like every single thing I'm putting in there has some kind of symbol or some kind of meaning. And you got to learn the whole deck because you don't want to put in the wrong thing on the wrong card. And just to know how much freedom you have and then trying to stay true to that genre too is it's a balancing act, but it's been so much fun. So like you said it perfectly, Jake, we were texting back and forth. He said, it's the perfect illustration project. It really is because there's all this stuff to draw but you don't have to totally explain it to the audience. It's really fun.
And when you get on the other side of this Kickstarter, I can just see we're going to meet to record the podcast and be like, guys, I pulled a fool card from the deck today. We can't record today.
I'm going deep.
It's a bad omen.
I'm going to do that for my Kickstarter though. I'm going to have a couple of readings because I'm going to have sample decks by the time the Kickstarter happens. So I'm going to do these, these readings from the actual deck, which will be pretty fun. For those of you guys who are watching on YouTube, we do have this on YouTube. You can see our beautiful faces. But anybody who's interested in a Kickstarter, I'm 6 months out from my Kickstarter. And what I'm doing today is I'm loading up boxes with fake product just to get weights and how much does shipping cost and how will I ship this project? You do not understand how early you have to get into that. If you guys are thinking about Kickstartering something, Will goes into it really well in his book, but people have been burned by that shipping thing. And so I get freaked out by what am I shipping? How much is it going to cost? How much does it weigh? And like little changes in the weight, like the difference between 1.99 pounds and 2.1 pounds can be like $1 or $2 difference in the United States and be like $15 in Europe difference in shipping. And so, so I'm prototyping the shipping now, even though I'm 6 months out.
You got to figure that stuff out.
Yeah.
What's nice though now on Kickstarter is you can set your tier reward price. So say it's $25 for the deck, and then a person can click an option of where they need it shipped to, stateside, Canada, overseas, and there's different shipping amounts. Where it used to be early days of Kickstarter, you just had to there was no you had to have a separate international tier for that and worry, now, whether people back the right tier or not.
And now there's third-party options for shipping as well. So lots of options.
Yeah. So then there's there's backer kit, stuff like that, where you can just say, hey, don't even worry about shipping now because this thing's not going to be ready for another 3 months and postage might change in that time. Who knows? And then they get when they fill out their survey, they could say, oh yeah, I want it shipped priority, or I want it shipped media mail, or I want it shipped overseas, and they can pay the amount there.
Yeah, but that gets you burned a little bit, right? I mean, Will did that, sort of adding the shipping at the end. Didn't people
It's more the people that aren't used to Kickstarter. The people that are used to Kickstarter or certain creators who do that, they understand and they become used to it, and it's not a big deal. Yeah, the international shipping. One of the things I'm going to do on my next one, since you asked, Jake.
Yeah, let's hear it.
The complete Kickstarter playbook, which is a timeline, checklist, and guide to running a completely funded crowdfunding campaign for artists. I
gotta say, I looked at your PDF you gave to Lee. Sort of it's like the pre version, like the more. It's not the final book, but it's way more than that.
It's just the manuscript.
Version,
yeah.
It's good. There's some good stuff in there.
Yeah, it's really good. I'm using it. I'm going to be sort of a guinea pig for it, actually.
Well, good. And
you need to have Lee as your case study.
Hey, for real.
That's it. You could do a lot worse with a case study, but yeah, I mean, the whole idea with the shipping is it's a mess, shipping, and you're trying to make it as easy as possible. And one of the things that I'm going to do on this one, which I already had promised all my backers on. What they don't teach in art school is they're getting this book, the ebook, for free because the shipping was so high going international. And I believe what I'm going to do on this one is not sell it internationally until after the Kickstarter.
That's totally legitimate. That's fair. The other thing, I mean, at some point this becomes all these problems become just as much of a project as distributing and shipping these books, just as much a project as making the thing itself. And I look at these board games that get made and they have all these components. I can't imagine
parts. Yeah.
You got to get the board made and printed. You've got to get the box made and printed. You got to get all the little cards, all the little figures, all the little wood pieces, the dice, all that, and put it together. It stresses me out looking at board game Kickstarters because I can't wrap my head around how they do that. I think most of those things are probably companies that are just using Kickstarter as a platform. So you've got a team of 5 people who all know what they're doing.
It still has to be done. It's tricky, but for the individual person, I mean, like you said, each thing becomes its own project. And as I do research on other decks that have done well on Kickstarter, the average deck that does well sells about 1,500 decks, say as just an average. 15 to 2,000 would be a very successful deck, but one of them sold almost 20,000. So what happens if you're part of a Kickstarter and you get that? You better be set up you're not going to be doing that in your basement. 20,000 orders. You have to scale. So you got to think about how will this scale if it does really well?
Just the size, the amount of space your stock would take up is you don't know how many books 1,000 books is until they're sitting in your driveway, and you're like, crap, where do I put these?
It weighs literally, it can weigh tons.
Yeah.
I mean, literally.
They have a forklift.
Anyway,
right.
sorry for that tangent. That was a long-winded way of saying, what are we doing?
Well, yeah, that is. I'll just throw out mine. I was going to kickstart Antler Boy Reprint. So back in 2012, 2013, I did a Kickstarter for a comic anthology. And I wanted to reprint the book. I sold out all those copies. It took me a few years, but I sold all 3,000 copies I ordered. And it's been, I want to say like 4 or 5 years since I've had a copy to sell. So I've just been selling the PDF download on my website. But I've wanted to have a print version because I get, questions, from people sometimes like, is this book available? Where can I get a copy? And I kept hating having to say like, there's no copies available. It's all sold out. So my idea was, okay, I'll just do a reprint. I'll design a new cover, have it be a second printing and kickstart it. And I just was feeling like a Kickstarter probably needs to be, it should be, I didn't want to show up at Kickstarter with a project I had already done and just say, this is a reprint, I want a Kickstarter to be more of an event and more of a thing that gets people excited. It's the next thing, because a lot of the backers that I have that back my books already have the Antler Boy. I didn't want to have a Kickstarter on there that was like, 50% or 20 or 75% lower in funding than the rest of them, because that might look bad, for future projects and whatnot. So I decided I'm just going to foot the bill for these books, order 1,000 copies and sell them on my website. And hopefully, I think I need to sell 300 in order to break even. And I'm hoping I can do that at Christmas time,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, if we can ever get back into doing little cons and shows and art fairs, that you'll hit that, one weekend.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Because that book it's an easy sell for people when they flip through it and they see all the different stories that are in there, and it's all ages, so they can give it to their kid without, worrying that they have to have a discussion at the dinner table about what they read and what they saw in the comic book. So that's my plan there. So
this is a Kickstarter podcast, is what we've
turned it to that.
Let's just run with it.
No. Well, I'm going to do a Kickstarter, hopefully before next summer, for an actual new book, and it may be drawing 6, or it may be a graphic, like a short graphic novel, kind of an experimental thing I want to do. So we'll see. Anyway, cool. I want to say too, Lee, I got your second newsletter email. You've done that twice now. Yep. And both times you tricked me. I was like, oh, what's Lee sending me? What's he emailing me? And I open it up and I'm like, oh, this is his newsletter. Still, it was informative and it was good. But I'm just getting the handle on what to put in there. But now I'm starting to get an idea of where I want to go with those. I think you can do some deep dives, just in telling people how a project is really going, not just like a surface level email, but an actual, content filled email. I think you treat them like you would treat your Kickstarter updates. So, when you do a post on Kickstarter and kind of show people behind the scenes and how things are going, like that is what you do, I think, is you make all these email newsletters leading up to your Kickstarter of the process. And then when the Kickstarter launches, those can be your updates. Be like, hey, I just want to, hey, we hit this stretch goal. And while we're here, I want to show you how I made, the Wanderer tarot card, or whatever went into it.
That's interesting. I'm still having over 65% open rate right now.
That's awesome.
I'm wondering when that's going to drop, but maybe as it goes.
Maybe, who knows? I just, my open rate is about 40 to 45%, which is good.
Well, you probably have a lot more people that encompasses, though.
It's about 8,000 people on the list. So I don't know.
Mine is only 98%. So a little frustrating.
Whoa! And they're all buying it too. They all
and 100% conversion rate.
100% conversion. They buy whatever you throw out there. All right, let's get going on this thing.
So, should we talk about a little bit about like why we are so into Kickstarters? at all? Well, so many of our listeners are probably into really trying to get freelance work. And what the heck are we talking about Kickstarter for so much?
Well, you're going there, so I'll follow you. Will,
let's dive in.
You're leading us down this path. You got this torch. You're like, come on, follow me down this.
Well, let me
path.
interview you, Lee. Why are you doing one?
At a certain
how come
point,
you're not taking this to a publisher, that does tarot decks?
Yeah.
I think we have reached the point in society where the content creator may know more than the company. And something I've been thinking a lot about is I want to see the art that artists want to make. That is the biggest thing. And I feel like, I've done enough books and I've worked on enough projects with clients where it's never quite that. There's always somebody who's dictating the project that makes you change it in a certain way, that it's too risky or it's too dark or just because marketing says everyone should wear a red shirt or some kind of weird thing, that you have to change a project to match these things. And over the past 2 years, I just left my agency. So this is a nice little segue. A lot of people are concerned about agents and stuff. I just left my agent. The work just wasn't matching what I think is interesting. I keep getting these projects offered and I just feel like kids are smarter than the stuff I'm being offered. I feel like kids are more interesting than the stuff I'm being offered. And so I think that ultimately I'd rather roll the dice and make the thing that I think is good. And I think through time in the field and the years of doing the art fair stuff, everything that I make will find its audience, I guess. It might not be a huge audience, but it'll find the right audience. And that has come to mean more to me than it being a huge, light amount of engagement for everybody. I'd rather somebody really like it and it be a smaller audience.
Mm-hmm. I kind of agree. Like you see the things that are like breakout successes, and this is in pre Kickstarter social media days, and they were things where the publisher was just taking a chance. And like, I don't know, this guy really believes in it. Let's do it. And it finds its audience and it clicks because it is so much, it's like something different from and it's pure. And it's like really from, that creator's, that could only come from that creator's like imagination or from their heart. And now you have access to so much more of that through these tools. You also have access to a lot more crap too. Like not everybody has vision, but I think if you are able to make something, if you're able to make something that's so good, it can't be ignored, you're going to do real good in this environment.
Mm-hmm. And for me, historically, it's always been the entrepreneur who says, I want to make a product and sell it, but I'm not good at making the art and I'm not good at coming up with the idea. So I'll find people who are good at the idea and writing, and I'll find people who are good at making art. I'll put them together. I'll pay them a little bit. I'll make the product. I'll sell it, and I'll probably make the majority of the profit. And that works as long as for an illustrator, as long as you're getting, tons of offers and good offers, But as the internet came online and as we became more of a global marketplace of illustration, those really good high paying jobs have been diluted and budgets have gotten smaller. So some artists are finding that they can take their product directly to market. And I'm just going to share my screen. If you're on, can you see my bears?
If you're on YouTube, you can see
on
this.
on our YouTube channel, which is Society of Visual Storytelling. This was a sample that I did for a company for a game, and they love the samples, and we couldn't agree on price because they wanted to go so low. So I got paid to do the samples here of these different bears it was a bear game, and then they just, after that, they just weren't willing to pay any money. I mean, anything real. And I wasn't holding out for a lot because it was a really fun game. I'm like, help me help you. Let's get this done. And she's like, well, we're just not sure how many we're going to sell. And I looked at their website and they look pretty successful. And I'm thinking, she wanted to do a flat fee, wasn't willing to do any royalties. And eventually it kind of fell apart. But, as an illustrator, if you can go a little further than the illustrations in coming up with the idea for a game or a tarot deck or a book or something, think of your dream job that you want to work on. And maybe you're not ready to do it right now. And maybe you have to take baby steps. I've told so many of our students that what you should do probably on your first Kickstarter is not the Kickstarter you want to do. You know what I mean? You probably should shelve the Kickstarter that is your dream and do a much smaller, simpler one, like some greeting cards or a deck of cards,
a pin set or something.
Yeah, something really simple where you only need to raise $1,000 just to get a Kickstarter out of your system and go through the whole thing so that you get ideas so that you don't screw up the one that you really
kind
want.
of a low stakes way to learn.
Yeah.
Also, if you haven't backed a Kickstarter ever and you want to do Kickstarters, back 5 Kickstarters. You don't have to back them at $50. I oftentimes, if I want to learn from a Kickstarter more than I want the thing, I'll just back it at $1 or $5. And I get all their updates. I get to see how it's funding and that kind of stuff. They still get help. I mean, they'll take whatever money they could get, right?
Yeah.
And it's just a great way to like be a part of that community. It also shows up on your it's funny when you see like someone has, so-and-so's launched a project. This is the first they've created, 0 backed, and it just tells me like, hey, I'm rolling up. I'm seeing what I can do here. I don't know how this community works. You want it to say, 20 backed or something like that,
Get all those updates. Really what we're talking about is eliminating the middleman.
Now, let me talk, because you just brought up greeting cards. It's a perfect time to talk about what you were just mentioning, where there's another company, they have the product, and then they hire the illustrator. I did some work for a card company out of Asheville, North Carolina for a little while, where they wanted to license probably like 10 or 15 cards, say, for example. The card quality was high. It was nice. They were getting in all these kind of boutique shops, which is where I wanted to be. And I thought, okay, this will be cool. And this is before I was selling cards on my own. And so I signed up with them, and they sold 500 cards of mine. And I would get these quarterly statements. They sold 500 cards at $5 to $7 a piece. Do you know what my paycheck was? $25.
Yeah.
Because I got 5% royalty.
Right.
You can't even fill your tank with that.
I couldn't believe it. I sent him an email going, there's got to be a typo here. You better at least add another 0. And even with another 0 on there, it's $250.
Well, how many cards sold and you got 25?
Around 500.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's like...
And so they made, what, I don't know what that is. Say they're... so they made $2,500. Now I know they pay for printing, but I printed my cards since then, and the print cost is nothing on cards.
Nothing.
So after I saw that, I went ahead and made my. You know how many cards I had to sell to hit that point where I'm now battling the company?
Right.
5 cards.
Right.
My cards sell for $5 a piece, and I've
such
sold
a great point.
Hundreds of them.
That's such a great point. See, they have overhead. They've got a brick and mortar location. They've got a secretary. They've got. Project manager that they've got different people involved all the way along the line that need to get paid. And if artists would just realize, like, you've got the product that they want, all you need to do is go a little further, but you really can't afford to roll up with something that is ordinary and boring. You really do have to spend your time thinking about how your product can be different than anything else that's out there,
Yeah.
But like Jake, your book, can I mention how much you made on Antler Boy, the first one?
Mm-hmm.
So he raised 84,000. Is that right?
Yeah, that's about right. I think that's right.
So
like 2,000 backers.
And then you were proud of that. Everyone was. You were one of the first on Kickstarter that I recall, an illustrator, to do that well. And so you were the talk of the town in the illustration community on 84 grand. And so you went to, if I remember right.
Can I say something before that? So
Yeah.
I was watching the Kickstarter space, and it was around for about a year. And I remember the first Kickstarter I ever saw was this guy who wanted to make a really cool Halloween decoration for his front yard, and he needed like $1,000 to help pay for it. And so he's going to the community, and I was like, oh, interesting. Oh, that's a fun way to get some, And I'm dumb. It takes me like, I got to get hit over the head 4 or 5 times before, I realize I need to wear a helmet or something. Right. And then I started seeing like, someone's like, well, I could use this to make my comics. And so Jason Brubaker went out, and I watched him, and I was like, that guy's always at the cutting edge of trying new stuff. Or at least he, you go through, I think, phases in life. And he was like the first guy on Patreon, the comic artist I knew on Patreon, the first one to do a Kickstarter, the first one to be doing like a web comic and newsletter. So he's like always like, chopping through the jungle in front of me. And I'm like, okay, let's see what this does. And in 1 month, he raised $12,000. And I was like, oh my gosh. Okay, I get it now. I see what you could do here. And that's what led me to want to do Kickstarter for my Antler Boy book.
But anyway,
sorry, that was just
that's great backstory on that. I didn't know that part. But you did really well. And then you went to your publisher in New York and said, hey, I did this. Do you want to pick it up? And they kind of said, 84,000 that's good for you, little boy. But for a publisher, we need, 5 times, 10 times that to gross. And so the takeaway there for me is, for you, the individual artist, that's amazing money. That's great money. And that shows you how much overhead there is in the publishing community, where they look at that and they're like not impressed.
Yeah, because they're not just looking at that 84,000. They're looking at the 2,000 copies sold, and they're wanting to do that every week,
right?
Or every month. They're wanting to launch it. 5,000 copies, 6,000 copies. I think it's 6,000 copies sold by the day of your launch at bookstores, and you get on the New York Times bestseller list. And to stay on it, you got to keep doing that sort of that kind of thing every week. Yeah.
And the cool news for artists is you don't have to. There's a lot of money to be made in the really super niche areas where publishers won't touch.
Yeah, so they need the Harry Potter, right? They need these big, the Spiderwick Chronicles. They need these big, things to feed the machine.
Yeah, the Catcher in the Rye and the To Kill a Mockingbird, I think, is what pays for Random House's skyscraper that they have in
how
Manhattan.
many ideas for books alone, not to mention games and stuff, but how many ideas for books get kiboshed, or passed on by publishers because they don't think they can sell 20, 30, 40, 50,000 copies. But you don't need to sell that many. You, as an artist, need to sell 2 to 4 or 5,000 copies and to make really good money.
Yeah. And then the side benefit is you get to make the art, again, going back to my original point, artists making the things they want. You make the art that you're super excited about, which then, even if that project doesn't do 5,000 copies, maybe it only sells 500 copies, but you made this great art. Now that starts to roll forward. Look at this artist, look at this great book. Somebody will like it. It's specific enough and going to raise your level. And then the next project is that level, you know what I mean? In terms of the art versus sometimes, you take these jobs from agencies or publishers and the project just isn't enough meat there to make a good illustration or a good portfolio piece. It doesn't move your career forward, in other words. So all this stuff has a cycle to it too. It's not just the project you're working on, but what does that project do for the next phase?
I think though you do lose something not having the feedback from an editor or the feedback from an art director, or just some really trained eyes, that know what's good and what's not. And so I think
it's a good point.
I think if you're just rolling out of bed and saying, I'm going to make a graphic novel and kickstart it, and there's no feedback from anyone online on it, and there's, you're not turning heads or anything with what you're doing, it's not going to be, I don't think this is a good path for you. You have to have a professional level. And even at that, like for me, I'm sitting here writing a comic story, like a 200-page graphic novel for Skull Chaser, and I've got it outlined, and I'm still wanting to like bounce this, back from like an editor, someone who reads comics all day, someone who knows a little bit about storytelling and character development, stuff like that. And so I think there's I think if you're going to go down that route, you do post it online as like a web comic. We're talking comics, maybe children's books for that regard, where there is the story element is very much a big component. You got to get some sort of feedback to know you're on the right path.
I think the kind of thing you're bringing up there is, if you ever watch Shark Tank, is having proof of concept. If you're just like you said, rolling out of bed, you're like, you know what? I don't even have to try to be an actual illustrator. I'm just going to do a Kickstarter instead. But you have no feedback from the audience. Right. You don't know what people want. You don't have a style that is proven purchase. You're going to spend a lot of time and make nothing probably, or you're going to need to figure that stuff out. I mean, every business that launches a product has that proof of concept phase. And in other words, will people buy this thing? Do people like it? Is the price point correct? Who's the audience? If you don't know those questions, you're not ready for a Kickstarter yet. I mean, my whole first Kickstarter was a compilation of my work in one single book form after 5 years of doing that at art fairs and selling all those images over and over and over and over. And so I knew there's a market for it. It wasn't just like, hey, I got some images sitting around.
Right. And I think so. Yeah, go ahead, Will.
I was just going to say 2 points. One, to go to that, I hired an editor and an art director, a graphic designer, to do what they don't teach in art school, and this next one, the Kickstarter Playbook, because I can't do that on my own, and I want the product to be professional, and I need that feedback. So you can include that in your budget. For your comics, you can. Yeah. I mean, there's room. I mean, you're still not paying for that Madison Avenue building.
I will add real quick here, because it's an important thing, that on the publisher side of stuff, the people that worked at publishers and still work at publishers occasionally are now starting to be entrepreneurial in the same way too. So a bunch of people that used to be art directors and editors at Random House, Scholastic, are now offering freelance editing, and I'm seeing that more and more. So they're like, hey, there's this whole market for it too, and those are total pros.
Yeah, my editor worked at Kaplan and another big publisher, Pearson, I think. Anyway, yeah, they're out there and they're for hire. So yeah, you can take advantage of that. Now, here's a question for you guys: at what point, how many years of practice as an illustrator, meaning as a freelance illustrator, did it take you before you were ready to do your first Kickstarter? Because for me, I'll answer that first. I don't think I was ready to do a Kickstarter until 15, 20 years in, to do a really, really good one. I
think I'm just now there.
Yeah, I took a lot longer. I see, the good news is I see a lot of our students getting past where I was in half the time. So like I see people at 7 to 10 years having an art craft ability that took me 15, 20 to get.
Yeah.
Because I'm dumb.
Yeah. No,
you're not dumb. The resources that people have now, everything is like that. Every sport, every industry, I think, is like that, because we have so much reference point. I mean, back in the day, it's like for skateboard. I grew up as a competitive skateboarder. It took, years to learn the tricks that kids get in 6 months now, because they watched it on YouTube. There's a how-to on YouTube.
Mhm.
There's, everybody can do it. And they're all pulling from these resources that are internationally now. For me to learn a trick, unless somebody else already knew it, I just had to learn it on my own. Like, I'm going to try this thing. No idea what I'm doing. And same is true for illustration, man. You're seeing everything with the demos, and even the school that we have is like, people can watch it at any time they want to and get the exact thing that they need. We didn't have that.
Yeah.
I feel like the human race has just been leveling up the last 10 years with like this information output of YouTube and social media, and being able to like essentially all day, every day being exposed to everybody's wins,
Yeah.
So no one's posting their loses, but you're just being exposed to that. And you're like, oh, I see how they did that. I want to level up. It's also, I think, why we got this massive, rate of depression and anxiety that's happening as well, because you're watching someone who has A, extra talent than you, B, extra resources than you, C, who maybe has just a completely different goals than you, doing things that you're just not able to do without sacrificing, some other things that are important to you, right? And so it's hard to peel back the curtain and see, what's really going on behind that. But at the same time, like, if you want to go learn how to do a kickflip, and like Lee said, back in the day, you had to know someone who knew how to do a kickflip.
Right.
I was just thinking too, going back to that, like, I was watching a YouTube video last night and I paused it and I thought, oh my gosh, I remember having VHS tape and not even being able to pause the image and have it be clean. And it was like staticky and like weird. And just to be able to like pause something and rewind really easy and watch it again is completely, it's just unfathomable to 20 years ago, Jake,
A lot of our viewers probably don't know what you're even talking about. We had VHS tapes, and so the picture's going along. It's a decent picture. It ain't HD, but it's a decent picture. But you pause that baby, and there's like lines through it that mess the whole thing up.
Because I remember my friend Drew. This was in '93 or '94. He got the VHS tape for Beauty and the Beast, and we all wanted to be animators, right? Back in the day, this was like we were sophomores in high school, I think, and he got the VHS tape for Beauty and the Beast, and he was like trying to draw the beast, and his video machine could actually pause and have a clear, crisp picture. I think there was some new digital technology, and so he paused it and he drew this Beauty and the Beast, like from that still image or the beast, the picture of the beast, like, yelling angrily, and brought it to school. And I was like, how'd you get this? Because this wasn't any image that you could see on any print material or anything. He's like, I paused the VHS, paused the video. And it's just, you couldn't do that kind of stuff.
Well, mine had a high risk factor because like before they had the skate videos coming out, I remember looking through like Thrasher magazine, and I would have the one still image of a professional skateboarder just shot at the perfect moment, over a 12-foot tall ramp. And then I would kind of look at that and just be like, all right, I got to reverse engineer that. And then, that the penalty of not doing that correctly, you landed on your head or and then when the videos finally came out, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was doing that completely backwards or wrong. Like I didn't do it right at all, but it's a different time. And like you said, it's exponential growth. I mean, our students, sometimes I'm absolutely amazed at how good the students get. But I will offer this little observation. Some people are going to like this and some people are not going to like this. Progression happens on a curve that is very steep in the beginning and it flattens out over time. And so me and David Hone were kind of looking at some of our students and that were just absolutely killing it when they were students. I mean, we were just like, oh my God, they're going to be the best illustrator on the planet. and it tapered off. They're still good illustrators, but that progression slows down. And so if you're nervous in your beginning and you're like, oh my God, everybody's getting so good so fast and I'm never going to catch up. Well, you do catch up really quick, and then it goes slower. The changes happen over a lot longer of a time period.
There's
years
something
in terms of days.
There's something else that goes with that, I think. And that is our level of quit. So some people seem to quit on an image when it's okay, where it's okay, and others press and push and say, I know it's okay, but it's not great and it's not amazing, and that is something that is really hard to teach. And we get asked a lot to review portfolios, and it's really hard to explain that to someone who doesn't already have that mindset of pushing. Like I look at their web portfolio and I'm like, to any parent, they'd be proud of this. To any high school or college student, they'd be like, wow, that's pretty good. But to an art director, to an illustrator who's made a career, they look at it and it's just, there's nothing about it that's impressive. And it's really hard. That's the hardest thing for me to convey, is your work just isn't very impressive. It's just passable.
Yeah.
It's just, it works.
It's sea level.
Sea level. Yeah. It's the curse of the bee student, right?
Yeah.
Like,
and you can't explain that to the layperson. You can't explain it. And the layperson's like, well, what's wrong with it? What's wrong with it is it's lackluster. It's just
right.
And I feel sorry for graphic designers, because explaining that about type, I think, would be the hardest thing. Impossible. Right. But good graphic designers really do know how to deal with type, but it's such an almost, I guess, ethereal. What makes a good type versus bad type? I can't even put it into words, but you know it when it's right or wrong.
Right.
That takes me back. Oh, go ahead.
I've been bumping up against this as well lately. And as far as feeling about my abilities, where I've been feeling like artistically I've been stagnant for the last couple of years, and I went and I hadn't really looked at Skyheart, my graphic novel, with like a critical eye for specific drawings. And so I opened it up and I was flipping through it because I just finished reading an amazing comic by this artist that I've known for years, and I knew him before he got like successful and popular, and I'm watching him do all this amazing artwork, and he's the talk of the town, and I love everything he creates. I've loved it back when it was just a web comic, and I love now he's doing professional comics, and it's just been cool to watch this rise and him getting better. And I'm reading through his latest comic and I'm just like, oh my gosh, he is so good. He is so stinking good. And then I pulled out my comic, and it's that thing that you say, Lee, always, like, pick your 9 best favorite artists, put your artwork right in the middle. And so I was looking at his and then looking at mine with that critical eye. And I realized, like, holy cow, Jake, you just phoned in every face in this comic. Like, none of these faces.
No.
That face is kind of good, but the rest of them are bad. And I was like, crap, I have to really, if I want to learn this, if I want to do good comics, I got to like figure out the face problem, because I'm great at machinery. I'm great at like environments. I'm great at anything that doesn't have a face, but then you ask me to do a face, and I kind of like shy away from it. And so, so I was just sitting there looking through that. I went and I talked to my kids. I was like, hey, what do you think about the faces I drew in Skyheart? And they're like, yeah, they're pretty bad, Dad. We didn't want to tell you.
What?
And I was like, why, you guys? Why didn't you say this? They're like, well, you were. And Allison, she, I talked about it with her, my wife, and she's like, you did a really good job finishing that thing in the amount of time that you did with everything that was going on. So you should be proud of yourself there. And I'm like,
oh no, the backhanded compliment.
Yes. They're all trying to be so supportive. So anyways, so that's my thing that I'm, and I told my friend this too. I was like, saying it. He's all, yeah, I don't know. I could kind of see that. And what was funny is I've been doing these, I don't know if you guys have been seeing this series of robots. I've been doing the social media bots. They're just more robots. They're fun. And I sent him the latest one. He's like, how's it going working on faces? And I'm just like, I know I'm drawing more robots. I'm afraid to fail at something.
We all have our strengths and weakness. It's hard to dive into your weakness, I mean, it's tough to.
Well, and you're balancing life. You're balancing all sorts of demands on your time, and as everyone is.
But I hear you, Jake. You want to bring your A game, right? I mean, you feel like what you're saying is like you sort of brought your B+ game, But
I was bringing my A game to a bunch of other things, and the faces. I was just like, this is where I'm at right now. I just got to go forward with it, But I do want to get better at that. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
So the thing I was going to say is that goes along with this is, you're talking about lackluster work. We've all done it. We've all seen it. We all don't want to be there. And if you look at going back to Kickstarter, if you look at a Kickstarter, if I look at the top 50 entries in under the illustration and comic section, which is kind of my groove to be in there, looking at that stuff. Out of let's say the top 50, I'm impressed by 2 to 5 of those, because there's something wrong with each one. Like there's a huge graphic design problem just in the thumbnail.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
Or there's a huge illustration problem, or both. And that doesn't even go down into the 51 to 100 or 100 to 200, because at any given time there's 150, 200, 300 projects. It fluctuates. For you guys listening that are thinking about doing a Kickstarter, you don't want to be competing anywhere except in the top 50. And so don't, just because somebody puts something on Kickstarter, everyone has a different story. And yes, there are going to be projects that succeed, and they have huge problems. But don't make the mistake that you can afford to not have good graphic design because they didn't and they succeeded. Their idea might have been amazing. So if you look at the categories where you need to nail it, probably the number one category is in your concept, in the idea, right? And then graphic design, unfortunately, right? Don't you think? I mean, like, I want to think that illustration and graphic design are the first, but they're not. I've seen plenty of good projects that have really good graphic design and illustration, and they barely fund,
right?
Or they don't fund,
right? But if you could do both, have a great idea and great illustration and great graphic design,
that's why I think though that a Kickstarter really pushes you to be on top of your game, because if this thing fails, it's really me. I can't put it on anybody else. That's what makes me more nervous about a Kickstarter too, is it's just, you're putting yourself out there. You're saying, here's what I got. I made the decisions. I was the one who picked what this thing looks like. And so it's gotten me sort of fired up. I mean, you should see how many sketches I've got. I mean, I'm going to have a making of booklet that goes with my project. I mean, and these cards are small and there's not much on them, but some of them, I swear I've drawn one of the cards, like, I'm not kidding, 50 times. Whoa. At least. And I just like, it's okay. I could probably, if it was for a publisher, I probably would have let it go after 4 or 5 of those drawings, but I know there's a better drawing in there. haven't got it yet. But I know it's there. I'm close, but
see, and you're to that point where that's a great place to be, where you're more critical than the art director would be. And every artist needs to get there. If you want to make a career and make good money as an artist, you've got to get to that point. You got to get to the point where you're not doing it to get it to pass the art director. You're doing it to get it to pass you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I know I say all the time, finished, not perfect.
Which is a really dumb thing to say.
It's well, no, because that's the whole thing there is that perfectionism can lead to paralysis, right?
Right.
Where
Yeah.
it's like you can't reach that ideal. At some point you're gonna have to ship that project, Lee. Like, and it will be what it is.
Yeah. I mean, that's why you set the here's when it launches, March 2nd. Like,
Yeah.
I have to move forward
Right.
at a certain point past that. Yeah. You can't just languish on, or just say, oh, I couldn't hit it, and I'm not going to do the project now.
Right. And everything has problems. Everything that is released and put out, even if it's brilliant and it's 5 stars, still there's things that people are like, oh, I wish I had one more month on this, or I wish I had, I wish I could tweak that one little thing. So you have to learn what to let go and what really does matter. And I think you're right, Will, like being able to, I think, have that like awareness of where you're at and where things should be is like, and then the ability to like bridge that gap is what makes you a pro.
Finished Not Perfect is brilliant though, in that it does whether you succeed or fail, if you're in it for the long run, you know, because it was so unfinished that it failed. It was so unperfect that it failed. You'll learn. Everything is moving forward.
Right.
Don't take your failures as the end. And
even we were talking about before we started recording, even the successes aren't the end either. I was talking about the Beastie Boys documentary that's on, I think it's on Netflix right now. I watched the other night, and they had these huge, so they had albums that had good sales, and on that album there'd be a hit song or 2 or 3, and each time they thought that was the big break, but it wasn't the big break, because then they'd have another one that where they learned from that one, and then the next album they put out is even more what they wanted. I want to say better, because some people might like the old one better, but for them it was a path, and they kept getting better, and then one song would be a big one on that one, and that would be the big successful moment. And so
Right.
you're always moving forward.
Right. And I think too, like I was listening to an interview with Tom Sachs. Do you guys know who he is? He's like a fine artist in Manhattan who does bricolage sculpture is what he calls it, I think is what it is. And essentially what it is he makes crappy replicas of real life things, but they're beautiful in their crappiness. So it's like one of his things was he replicated the moon landing as sort of this live performance art experience, rented out a hall, made a replica of the moon lander, life size, made a replica of mission control, made miniatures of like the rockets, and then put cameras everywhere. So you as an audience can watch the moon landing happen, replica spacesuits with helmets and like oxygen moving, but you could see like screws and plywood and tape and all that stuff. I love his things. And so part of his thing is also make film, to record and to film the stuff as well. And one of the interviews was his 10 rules for filmmaking. And he didn't get to the 9. He just talked about the first rule. And the first rule is make a film. And I'm like, that's really it. Like for illustration, for comics, for your card deck, for anything, the rule number 1 is you have to make it and finish it and put it out there. And it doesn't matter if you have a crappy camera or you have crappy tools. It doesn't matter if it's not perfect in all these other avenues and categories. It has to get made. It has to be finished. And I think that's essentially, anytime I've learned anything, it's from putting out that finished product and finishing that thing and having it there and looking at it, feeling that sense of accomplishment, but then also looking at it a year later, 5 years later, 10 years later, and reviewing it and being critical about it and seeing where I could improve and do better. Because the thing you made is like your benchmark. It's that thing that it's like this, this mile marker in your life where that's what you were able to do at that time. And if you never finish a thing, you'll never have those markers to like look back on and see where you need to improve and move forward.
It's true.
And you're not your career isn't about the book you're working on today. It's not about the Kickstarter you're doing tomorrow. It's about
Right.
all the books and all the Kickstarters. And I think a lot of times people get so myopic that they don't see the fact that they're going to be creating for decades, and that they're building a brand over time.
Right. Well, and I read 12 Rules for Life from Jordan Peterson. And one of them he talked about in there is that when you're teaching a kid about sports, you're not teaching them. I mean, I don't know how you're teaching a kid about sports, but he said what you want to do is you're not teaching them that you need to win this game. You're not even teaching them that you need to win this, the championship
Season. Yeah.
Or the season, or that you need to win multiple seasons. You're teaching them, this is how you play. Like, this is the rules. This is sportsmanship. This is where you are able to dial back. This is where you're supposed to be aggressive. This is how you not get in fights. The kid who fights doesn't get to play. The kid who's a team player, goes to the championship, those types of things. And it applies, his application was that applies to everything in life. And so if you're thinking, I've got to finish this illustration, that's too short-sighted. If you're thinking I got to finish this book, that's too short-sighted. Even I got to win a Caldecott someday, or I've got to have a $1 million Kickstarter. That's too short-sighted. It's like, I want to have joy in the thing that I'm making. I want to make the best thing I can make. And all of these measures of success after that are just a reaction to my work ethic.
Perfect.
Well said.
It's a good place to end. We never got to the podcast.
No.
Yeah. We'll do the podcast next time.
All right.
No, what we're giving people is, this is kind of conversations that we have just in the studio sort of thing when we're just all talking, so that was kind of a eavesdropping in our studio conversation. I don't know how that happened.
Just riffing on each other.
An hour.
All right, everybody. 3-Point Perspective is made possible by SVSLearn.com. We're becoming a great illustrator starts. And your hosts have been, who are we? Jake Parker, Lee White, and Will Terry. You can find Lee White's work at leewhiteillustration.com and follow him on Instagram at leewhiteillo. You can find Will Terry's work at willterry.com, and his Instagram account is willterryart, at willterryart. Is that right? That's right.
Yeah.
I don't have it right here in front of me. And then my website is mrjakeparker.com, and you can follow me on Instagram at Jake Parker. Podcast is produced by Daniel 2. He's our podcast guy here at SVS Learn, and you can find his stuff at daniel2.co, and 2 is spelled TU. Special thanks to our SVS production manager, David Bro, and a thank you to our social media specialist, Lisa Fott, for all that she does. And for everyone at SVS, thank you for all that you do, and all of our subscribers who are there. We love you guys, and we do this stuff. We do this stuff for you. So, if you like this episode, and you want to share it with others who might be doing a Kickstarter, just send them a link to either our podcast page on svslearn.com or to iTunes or the podcast app, wherever you listen to it. Leave a review and pass that along. These podcast episodes live and die by word of mouth, so we appreciate that. And then if you actually want to join in on this discussion, if you go over to svslearn.com, on the forum, we have a thread devoted specifically to this episode, so you can chime in over there and let us know what you think. I think that's it. We'll see you guys next time.